Thanks, Dan. Good morning. Welcome to Trinity United Church in Gravenhurst. This lovely Sunday morning, I am anticipating that there are not as many people sitting in front of their screens this morning because the weather's too nice. It's just like real church. I'm watching the numbers, folks. I watch them every week all the way through, and I can tell since Easter there's been a steady little trickle of decline. So I get it. I understand it. But it's still nice, those of you who are watching. We're happy that you're here. We're happy to be here with you. A couple of things to start with. I want to say hi again to my mom. Haven't seen her in a couple of weeks. To my Aunt Shirley, my Aunt Carolyn down in Nova Scotia. And on a sort of a sad note, but I think something I feel like we should do, or at least note this morning, I brought in my Air Force wedge, which is a proper dress hat for the Air Force, and some Air Force tartan in honor of Captain Jen Casey, who was killed in the snowbird. So we're just going to leave those there this morning just to remember. Again, Nova Scotia had our terrible time in the last couple of months, but we'll just leave those this morning, and we'll light candles in her memory and in the other folks who are still suffering in Nova Scotia. So I think, yes, I'm going to tell a little story about this, because this is a long, convoluted story, but friends of mine who I met when I worked on the Air Force Base in Trenton as a chaplain. So they came to the chapel, came to church, and while they were there, I preached a sermon on the different views of Jesus. And one of the movie illustrations I used was Talladega Nights. And I am not recommending anybody go and watch this movie. I just want to be clear about it. It has things like grown men running around in their underwear with helmets on. Don't watch it. Please don't take my recommendation. But nevertheless, in the movie, Will Ferrell, who plays the main character, always is saying grace to dear baby Jesus. He refuses to let Jesus grow up. His prayers are always to dear baby Jesus. So my friends, Don and Nancy Larkin, who I see in PEI every summer, which is a whole other coincidence I will not go into, anyway, had been watching our services online and remembered that movie and me talking about Will Ferrell and sent me this picture, which has Will Ferrell praying to dear baby Jesus. And it says, "Please don't make Brussels sprouts be the cure for the coronavirus." Amen. I thought that was just about absolutely perfect. So I wanted to share that with you this morning. So Don and Nancy, thanks for that. And that had to be about 10 years ago. So that's how long that image stuck in their head. So don't watch the movie. So this morning, the theme for the service is making things better. And the first quote is from C.S. Lewis. "Had this world been so kind to you that you should leave with regret, there are better things ahead than we leave behind." Or since Fet Martin, live the very soul of expectation of better things, in the conviction that something large, grand, and beautiful will await you if your efforts are intelligent, if your mind is kept in a creative condition, and you struggle upward toward your goal. And George Gissing, "It is because nations tend towards stupidity and baseness that mankind moves so slowly. It is because individuals have a capacity for better things that it moves at all." Let us pray together the opening prayer, which was written by Bishop Thomas Ken somewhere between 1637 and 1711. And I still think it's very current in this age. "O God, make the door of this house wide enough to receive all who need human love and fellowship, narrow enough to shut out all envy, pride, and strife. Make its threshold strong enough to be no stumbling block to children, nor to straying feet, but rugged and strong enough to turn back evil's power. God, make the door of this house the gateway to your eternal kingdom. Amen."
presence as we now adore you, and with awe appear before you. Here in this your temple, all within keep silence, gather now with deepest reverence. You alone, God, we own. You are God and Savior. Praise your name forever. God, reveal your presence. Hear the harps resounding. See the crowds and thrones surrounding. Holy, 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 hear the hymns ascending. Angels keep their voices blending. Bow your ear to us here, hearken, O Lord Jesus, to our humble praises. O great fount of blessing, purify my spirit, trusting only in your merit. Like the holy angels, gather all before you. May I ceaselessly adore you. Let your will ever still through your church terrestrial, and the host celestial. Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me into life. Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me into life. Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me into life.
Holy God, in your gracious presence, we confess our sin and the sin of this world. Although Christ is among us as liberation and peace, we are a people divided against ourselves as we cling to the values of a broken world. The profit and pleasures we pursue lay waste the land and pollute the seas. The fears and jealousies that we harbor set neighbor against neighbor and nation against nation. We abuse your gifts of imagination and freedom, of intellect and reason, and have turned them into bonds of oppression. Heal and forgive us. Set us free to serve you in the world as agents of your reconciling love. Amen. Take comfort in the assurance that even those things that are hidden from memory or are too deep for words are not beyond God's forgiving love. God, who knows us completely, bestows pardon and peace.
Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me into life. Bless the Lord, my soul, and bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, my soul, who leads me into life.
How's the sun effect this morning? Am I shining? Good? All right. So we're finally leaving 1 Peter, and I thought for a bit of a change this morning, instead of using a gospel lesson, we would go to the Psalms. We don't talk about the Psalms very often. Anybody that grew up in the church, you would remember that every Sunday we would read or sing a psalm. We'd start with usually an Old Testament lesson, then a psalm, then an epistle, then a gospel. I stopped doing that quite a few years ago because I found by the time we got to the epistle, everybody was not paying attention anymore. It was just too many scripture lessons. So for the last about 15 years, I pick one lesson a Sunday, and that's the one I use out of the lectionary. So this was the psalm for the lectionary this morning. It's Psalm number 68. It's not particularly a well-known psalm. You don't hear it quoted very often, but it is full of imagery like a lot of psalms are, and it holds a general structure like a lot of the psalms do. Now, we were brought up to think that all the psalms were written by David. That is not true, and we'll talk a little bit about that just so you understand why. But one of the images in this psalm, which is really kind of interesting, is it speaks about God because it comes from the Hebrew Scriptures. Of course, there's no mention of Jesus in it. It talks about God as being Father of the fatherless and protector of the widows. So what happens, of course, in Middle Eastern culture, if there is no father, then the children have nobody to protect them. If a woman is a widow and she doesn't have any of her dead husband's brothers to marry, she's also penniless and destitute. So the idea that in the psalm that God would be Father of the fatherless and protector of the widow is a very powerful image in that particular culture. So I'll just quickly go through this. If we can go to the next one, yeah. And you can look at this after if you want to refresh your memory. The book of the Hebrew Scriptures, the Psalms, is composed of sacred psalms or poems meant to be sung. So they're all meant to be put to music. In the Hebrew Bible, the Psalms begins the third and last section of the biblical canon known as the writings, in Hebrew, Ketuvim. In the original Hebrew, the text, the books, they weren't named at all. So there was nothing called the Psalms. They were just listed in the book, and often they would have a word in front of them, was mizmor in Hebrew, which meant that they should be accompanied by a stringed instrument. Again, that's been lost in our history as to what that was or what the tunes were. And rabbinic literature, which is interesting, calls them with a hybrid name, which is partly masculine and partly feminine, which is fascinating because that rarely ever happens. And the Psalms had their setting in the ritual life temple of the Temple of Solomon before the Babylonian exile. That's 6th century BC, which is why they're not written by David, or not most of them. And then they became the hymn book of the Second Temple of Jerusalem. That's the one that lasted right until Jesus' time and was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. So the idea was that every worship service in the temple, the Psalms would be sung as part of the worship service. And again, why David's not really the writer of all the Psalms. Sorry about the long explanation, but that's the way it goes.
A reading from the 68th Psalm. May God arise, may his enemies be scattered, may his foes flee before him. As smoke is blown away by the wind, may you blow them away. As wax melts before the fire, may the wicked perish before God. But may the righteous be glad and rejoice before God. May they be happy and joyful. Sing to God, sing praise to his name. Extol him who rides on the clouds. His name is the Lord, and rejoice before him. A father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads forth the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. When you went out before your people, O God, when you marched through the wasteland, the earth shook, the heavens poured down rain, before God, the one of Sinai, before God, the God of Israel. You gave abundant showers, O God. You refreshed your weary inheritance. Your people settled in it, and from your bounty, O God, you provided for the poor.
Like a healing stream in a barren desert, spirit water bringing life to dusty earth. God is trickling through our lives as in a dream unfolding, promising revival and rebirth. Like a healing stream. Like a gentle rain on a thirsty garden, spirit water come to nourish tiny seeds. God is bubbling through the soil to coax a new creation, yearning for an end to want and need. Like a gentle rain. Like a river strong on a thirsty current, spirit water rushing on to distant shore. God is carving out a channel in a new direction, calling for an end to hate and war. Like a river strong. Like a mighty sea, reaching far horizons, spirit, water, and love, and delta deep and wide. God is working in our hearts to shape a new tomorrow. God will always challenge and provide. Like a mighty sea, like a river strong, like a gentle rain, like a healing stream.
Thanks, guys. So, when I got up this morning, Colleen asked me what I was preaching about, and I said, I don't know. So, I can't figure out whether I was trying to take a complex subject and make it simple, and what I think I've done is taken something simple and made it very complex. So when I was reading the words to that hymn that Dan and Dave just sang, I realized this is like what I learned in, I think it probably was science, maybe it was geography, I don't know. You know those meandering streams? You know, that they start from a spot and then they just literally meander wherever the water can go. So they don't go in a straight line, they just meander wherever they can get through the geography. That's what this is going to be like. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, so you'll just have to ride along, okay? So I'm just going to do it because I got nothing else. That's the other problem. I don't have any other way to go. And I realized Dan and Dave and I were talking about this last week. Because we're doing this like in this environment without very many people, we're not spontaneous. It's almost like we have to stick to the script or something's going to go wrong out there in internet land. So ordinarily on a Sunday like this, I might say, what do you want me to talk about this morning? But because we're on the internet, you got to stick to the script. So it's a very different world. So we're going to talk about strange beasts of a sort. So here we go. So in the Psalm 68, which I said, it's a fairly conventional psalm, very conventional images. When you, God, went out before your people, when you marched through the wilderness, we all know what that is. It's a common idea coming out of Egypt, the Israelites going into the desert. The earth shook, the heavens poured down rain before God, the one of Sinai, the God of Israel. You gave abundant showers. You refreshed your weary inheritance. Your people settled in from your bounty, and you provided for the poor. So, all images of God, all things God did for people. So, now this is where we're going to go switch to a whole different gear. So, this is a movie. And I'm not going to recommend this movie to you. I'm just saying I saw it several times. Yeah, okay. So, this movie is called Fantastic Beasts and the Places to Find Them. It's a kind of Harry Potter movie written by J.K. Rowling. This guy is a wizard, and that little suitcase holds a whole other kingdom full of wild animals and fantastic beasts. I know it sounds crazy, because it is crazy. Nevertheless, if you watch the movie, I don't recommend it, but if you watch it, you will understand. It's a whole other dimension. Now, the whole premise of the movie is that this man is trying to save these fantastic beasts which are going extinct because they're magical, and people are killing them or capturing them, and they have no place to live anymore, so he's literally going around and saving them. And they're beasts that look like this. Once they come out of the suitcase, they're huge, magnificent creatures. So the movie itself is one of those things people get lost in because it has images that we can't have in our own lives. And the guy who plays the wizard, from my perspective when I watch the movie, is a Jesus figure. Even though it's about wizards and magic, he's a Jesus figure because he is saving things that are lost, working in the face of evil that's trying to contain them, and he's a good person in the midst of it. So there's all these sort of magical themes, but there's this kind of same old battle about good and evil. And we all get captured in that whole idea of being in the midst of good and evil. So I have another one, and I would actually recommend this one to you. Okay. All right, Narnia. Now, Narnia, the Narnia tales were written by C.S. Lewis, who I quoted at the beginning of the service. He's a very famous, or was, very famous Christian theologian. Wrote some very heavyweight books that made lots of headway in Christianity, but he also wrote the Narnia series for his child. And it became a very popular one. Can we skip back for a second there? Oh, wait, sorry, we can do that. But in this rendition, the later rendition of the movie, he has very Christological themes in a movie with talking lions and animals. So in this movie, the lion represents the Jesus figure. And it becomes such an allegory in the movie that actually, spoiler alert, the lion actually gives up its own life and is crucified and comes back to life again. It can't get any more literal than that, right? It's as literal as it comes in terms of Christian themes. And yet if you go online and look it up, you'll get 100,000 hits on, is the lion really the Jesus figure in C.S. Lewis? right? Because fundamentalism, Christianity, is not really comfortable with that because there's magic in it as well and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, for poor, everyday Christians like us, it's pretty literal. But again, it's that great controversy that we all feel. So we can go to the next one then, Courtney. So this was the earlier Chronicles, and this one is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, right, which came from that. But you see how simplistic this one is. This is very cutesy. The newer movie's a bit darker than the original book. But the stories that C.S. Lewis portrays are the same things that we all struggle with in our lives. What happens when things go wrong? What happens when we find ourselves in unfamiliar territory? What happens when our world shifts a little bit due to circumstances we can't control? How do we react? What does our faith do? How do we respond to our friends, to our family? How do we manage our daily lives? Or do we succumb to temptation, like C.S. Lewis writes, where the children, when they're in a strange land, 3 of them bond, but one of them feels left out and succumbs to temptation, has to be drawn back into the family again. All very common themes, but easier to digest when there's kind of magic around, because then they're not quite personal. So the questions that I was working on this week are, when times are difficult, we struggle to find images that assist us in sorting out our inner struggles. Right? We look somewhere, we turn somewhere. We ask, how do we deal with this? We ask the question, are we responding to the crisis properly? And I don't know if you listen to the radio or watch the TV or go on the internet, the conversation is constant about the coronavirus. Am I doing okay? Are you doing okay? Is there anything else we should be doing? Is there anything we shouldn't be doing? And the other question, which is always fascinating, I'm doing okay, but I've seen those people and I don't think they're doing okay. Right? I was in a McDonald's parking lot today, and there were 2 guys in pickup trucks parked facing the road with their doors open, and they had lawn chairs, and they were sitting beside each other. Now, is that okay? I don't think that's social distancing. But I didn't say a word, just saying. You see what I mean? Like, we're always checking, we're always looking. Is everybody doing okay? Is everybody following the rules? Right? Or do we know the rules? And are we being drawn in or overpowered by evil or temptation? And evil or temptation comes in many forms. In this world, every time you turn your computer on, there's all kinds of temptation, right? There's the witch, there's the wizard, right? There's the politician, there's the banker, there's the cleric, right? There's 100 voices, or 1,000, or 1,000,000 out there all telling you you should do this instead of that. I mean, when we were in the midst of the coronavirus, there were 200 or 300 people sitting out at Queen's Park protesting about self-isolation. They wanted to express their right to get each other sick. Right? Some guy with a bullhorn was saying it was all a lie. Nobody was sick. Right? There's always another voice out there. There's always a voice out there telling you what you think is not quite right. And the question that I always ask, and maybe I ask it too much, maybe I should be much simpler in that aspect, is, are we learning anything new or mysterious in this experience? Or is it just do we just want to get back to the same old? Is there anything new happen to us? Have we learned anything special or mysterious? Have any kind of shields dropped off our hearts or our eyes, and we're seeing the world in a new and different way? And of course, the question for people of faith is our faith of any help? Does it make us stronger? Does it make us bolder? Does it make us freer? I don't know. I can't answer that question. So it is interesting, though, because those are kind of, the fantastic beasts and Narnia. Those are strange and wild images. But yet, if we go back to the Bible, we can go on to the next one. Are we stuck? Oh, there we go. So what's interesting is if you go back to Psalm 68, after looking at those crazy images of flying magical beasts, where do we find ourselves? Back in wildland, right? Back in Psalm 68, may you blow them away like smoke as wax melts before the fire. May the wicked perish before God. And there's God, right in the tents, right around the temple, in the midst of the Israelites. There's how they perceive God. Big fiery pillar right in the middle of them. I think that's kind of fantastic. How about the next verse? This one says, sing to God, sing in praise of his name, extol him who rides in the clouds. So this is in your basic Bible, folks. English translation. We have a God who flies in the clouds. That's kind of fantastic. That's kind of like Fantastic Beasts, I think. Not only that, he's got these cute little cherubs around him with wings. And they fly around him day and night, it says, in parts of the Bible. And one more, of course. This is one of the ones we talk about all the time. We have a God who lights bushes on fire and then speaks from them. Right? I mean, that's pretty fantastic. Right? You don't have to go to Harry Potter to get stuff like that. Right? You just go to the Old Testament. Go, Psalm 68. There you go. You got it right there. Right? So what's interesting is that these are already part of our consciousness. So it's no wonder we're drawn to those images. It's no wonder C.S. Lewis wrote Narnia, because we're already locked and loaded for those mystical images. Those aren't new for us. They're in there already. All somebody has to draw them out. So, a couple more questions. Anthropomorphize. You know what that means, right? That's when you take an animal and make it human, or anything and make it human. We anthropomorphize our pets, right? I mean, if you have pets, especially dogs, maybe cats, you give them personalities, right? You tell them. They speak to you. You say, oh, you want to go out? Oh, you want to go see the birds, don't you? You don't know what the dog wants. Right? But you'll talk. If people come over, you'll say, oh, he was such a good boy today. He sat beside me and we talked back and forth. The dog was sitting there waiting for food. Right? Well, oh, no, you had a whole conversation with that little guy today. Huh? We do that all the time. We also, though, we anthropomorphize God. We give God a gender. We give God a body. Right? We make God human. We create God in our own image. All our art has God sitting on a cloud. He's an old man like me, except he's got some hair. Right? But that we make God. We make God like us. We're not like God. And what's interesting to me is we anthropomorphize COVID-19. We've made it a thing. It's evil. It's out to get us. We're fighting it. And I remember listening to this doctor, and the doctor said the most fantastic thing. He says, you know what? If nobody moved, nobody would get sick. He said, because the virus doesn't have legs or arms or wings. He says, the only reason people get sick is because they move, and they touch each other, and they give it to each other. He says, the virus by itself would just die off. It can't move. We're the virus. He says, we're the problem, not the virus. But we make the virus evil. We create this kind of evil around it, as it's our enemy. But as I learned in that protest, it's not the enemy. We're the enemy. We are always our worst enemy. Human nature. So again, I ask the question, what can I learn from this? What can I learn? I found this quote from Anne Frank I thought was really interesting. An empty day, though clear and bright, is just as dark as any night. Now, I think people like Anne Frank get to say stuff like that. I think most of us don't. I think she does, because she lived through many clear, bright days that were dark. And if Anne Frank could come out of that experience of not self-isolation, but imposed isolation for fear of her life, and at the end of the day, be a generous and caring and wonderful person, who's been an inspiration to millions, in particular, of teenagers who read her works when they entered teenagehood. If she could do that through that experience, how much more could we do through this experience? There's a fascinating scene at the end of Fantastic Birds where I think his name is Eddie, but I'm not good at the names in these Roland movies. But where he gets to let this big bird go free. And it's sort of near the climax at the movie, and they obviously have made a bond between them because this is the last of its kind. And then they sort of touch heads and the bird flies away. And it's interesting because you notice as it happens, there's very much that sense of this freeing or emptying of the spirit. It's almost like the bird and the wizard have some kind of symbiotic relationship. And as the bird flies, part of the wizard's spirit goes with him. It's very powerful. Again, I'm not recommending the movie. Don't waste your money on it. Don't watch it. Don't give me thumbs down for that, okay? But it just is really interesting. You can so see what the director was trying to get at, that idea of how beings, no matter how fantastic or strange, have this kind of symbiosis. Even though they separate, they're connected. So I had this last quote for you. We've gone down this meandering stream today. You gave abundant showers, O God. You have refreshed your weary inheritance. I had to read that 3 or 4 times to sort of get a sense of it. And what the psalmist is talking about is we are the weary inheritance. He's talking about the Israelites coming out of slavery and going through the desert and getting to the promised land. And by the time they get there, they are weary. But this is their inheritance. They are God's children. So He has refreshed them. They have been tried and tested, and now they are at peace. And I thought that was fascinating for just one little line in the verse, the idea that no matter what happens, God is present and comforts them. So I'm going to leave you with one more. I did have one more. And I think it's important to remind us. I need to be reminded like this. And I think it's kind of ironic, too, because this is from 1 Peter, and I told you we weren't doing anything else, but I snuck it in. God has given each one of you a gift from His great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. I would like to think going through the coronavirus, one of the things that we have done, I have seen it a great deal, is we have become much more loving and caring for the people around us. And in particular for strangers and people that maybe we haven't known well before. We've looked after. I've watched people take care of their neighbors, strangers, people on the street, anybody they could help. And I think that's a part of our spiritual giving, is when times are difficult, we need to learn to give more. So I hope we're going to keep that up after it's over. Thanks for listening.
Last week, Dan gave out the challenge that we could combine ideas of recent events with a hymn. So I had to think about it a lot because it wasn't easy to do. In fact, the recent events are so complicated. So how do you simplify it enough to express it in a hymn? So this is part poetry. I also know that Dan has other people who have offered their own creative pieces, and you'll be hearing those in the future. So this could be quite an exciting project. Okay. A major shift, our souls adrift. What can we do today to save the trees from burning, the oceans from churning, or our hearts from turning away? The earth is hotter, We've tainted the water, and now our health grows dim. The future's unsure. We don't know the cure. Let's stop and listen to him. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me we are his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks, and the sound of his voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gives to me, the hope to me is bringing, and he walks with me, and he talks with me. He tells me not to despair. People everywhere are working to make a difference. Love and understanding will get us there.
Thanks, Linda. That was great. Very good. So it's working.
So thank you, Linda. That's awesome. And we did get another one from Carol Barr. So next week we'll present that.
Oh, excellent. Good. All right, so we are going to, I'd like to light candles, Dan. So I don't know if you want to play something for a bit while I'm doing that, if that's okay. So we're doing a candle in memory of Captain Jen Casey, and the rest of the candles in memory of the folks who were killed in Nova Scotia. And the helicopter, yes. If you would join me in the pastoral prayer. Giver of all good, you continually pour your benefits upon us. Age after age, the living wait upon you and find that your faithfulness has no end, that your care is unfailing. We praise you that the mystery of life is a mystery of infinite goodness. We praise you for the order and constancy of nature, for the beauty and bounty of the earth, for day and night, summer and winter, seed time and harvest, for the varied gifts of loveliness which every season brings. We give you thanks for all the comfort and joy of life, for our homes, for our friends, and for all the love, sympathy, and goodwill of all people. Amen.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Before we sing our last hymn this morning, again, my endless gratitude to the folks who come out every Sunday and help us put our service online. Especially Dan. Thank you very much, Dan. He continues to be creative and innovative and taking people out and putting them to work, and I really appreciate that, Dan. Thank you very much. Dave, stalwart. And I must admit, I think Dave and Dan are just getting better as time goes on. Not that they weren't ever not better, but they're just getting better. So we're trying to convince them to do Bridge Over Troubled Water one Sunday. That's what we're working on, right? The Simon and Garfunkel Sunday. So we'll see. I've said it out there in public now. So now if you think it's a good idea, you could just write in and say, good idea, right? That would be helpful. And of course to Andrea, who runs the camera and is here constantly every week. I can't thank her enough for doing that. It's wonderful. And Courtney, thank you very much for all the backup work, all the audiovisual stuff, of course. Dave is doing the sound. Thank you, Dave, for doing that. And Linda, thank you for coming, singing. We really appreciate it. That's great. All right, let's sing our last hymn.
Come, O fount of every blessing, to my heart to sing your praise. Stream of mercy, never ceasing, call for songs of endless praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, God of God's unfailing love. Here I pause in my sojourning, giving thanks for having lost at every turning, God will guide me safely home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God, came to rescue me from danger. Precious presence, precious love. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor, daily I am drawn anew. Let that grace now, like a fetter, bind the wandering heart to you. Prone to wander, I can feel it, wander from the love I've known. Here's my heart, I'll take and seal it for your very own.
And now may the peace of God, which passes every human understanding, keep watch over our minds and hearts, bodies and souls, this day and forevermore. Amen.
Go now in peace, never be afraid. God will go with you each hour of every day. Go now in faith, steadfast, strong, and true. No, God will guide you in all you do. Go now in love and show you believe. Reach out to others so all the world can see. God will be there, guiding with God's love. Go now in peace, in faith.